Hello, everyone. I'm Elena, your host for today's lesson. If you are new here, I want to let you know that we publish a brand new English learning video every single day on this channel to help you improve your English step by step with confidence and with joy. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do that now and press the bell icon so you never miss a single lesson. Today's episode is very special, and I say that genuinely because this is the kind of lesson that I believe can completely change the way you experience English. Today, we are doing something that the best language learners in the world do every single day. We are going to practice real English listening through stories. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Stories? Is that really going to help my English? And my answer is absolutely yes. In fact, stories are one of the most powerful tools in all of language learning, and I will explain exactly why in just a moment. But first, let me tell you what today's lesson looks like. We have 3 complete stories for you today. The first story is for beginners, told slowly and clearly with simple vocabulary. The second story is for intermediate learners, with more detail, more natural speech patterns, and richer language. And the third story is for advanced learners, told at a more natural pace, with complex sentences, idioms, and expressive vocabulary. But here is the beautiful thing. Even if you are a beginner, I encourage you to listen to all 3 stories. And even if you are advanced, the beginner story will give you a chance to hear how simple English flows and sounds when spoken well. Every level has something to gain from every story. For each story, here is exactly what we will do together. First, I will tell you the story slowly and clearly, so you can simply listen and enjoy. Then, I will go through key vocabulary and phrases from the story and explain them. Then, we will do an active speaking section where you shadow important sentences from the story. And finally, I will give you a short reflection practice where you answer questions about the story in your own words. This format gives your brain 4 different kinds of practice in one lesson: listening, vocabulary building, speaking, and thinking, all at once, all through stories. Before we begin, make sure you are in a comfortable place. If you can, grab a notebook and pen. You may want to write down words or phrases that are new to you. And most importantly, relax. You are not being tested today. You are learning through enjoyment. And that is the most natural and effective way to improve your English. So, let's begin. Before we jump into our first story, I want to spend just a few minutes explaining why stories work so well for language learning. Because when you understand why something works, you use it better. The first reason stories are powerful is that they create context. When you learn a new word or phrase inside a story, your brain connects that word to a situation, a character, an emotion, and a sequence of events. That connection makes the word much easier to remember than if you had simply read it in a list. Research in language learning consistently shows that words learned in context are remembered 2 to 3 times more effectively than words learned in isolation. So every new word you pick up from today's stories is a word that has a much better chance of staying with you. The second reason is emotional engagement. When a story is interesting, when you care about what happens to the characters, your brain releases a small amount of dopamine. That is the chemical associated with pleasure and reward. And when your brain is in that state, it is actually better at absorbing and storing new information. In other words, an interesting story makes your brain want to learn. It makes the process feel natural rather than like hard work. The third reason is rhythm and flow. Every language has its own music, its own rhythm, its own natural melody when spoken well. When you listen to stories told naturally in English, you are absorbing that music. You are training your ear to recognize the sounds, the pauses, the rises and falls, the connections between words. This is called prosody, and it is one of the most important parts of sounding natural in any language. You cannot learn it from a grammar book. You can only learn it by listening and by repeating. The fourth reason is that stories feel real. Even when a story is fictional, the situations in it reflect real life, real emotions, real conversations, real challenges. And because of that, the language you learn through stories is language you can actually use. Not language that only exists in textbooks, but language that lives and breathes in the real world. So with all of that in mind, let's begin our first story. It is at the beginner level, and it is called The New Neighbor. Before I tell you the story, let me give you a few important words that you will hear. Listen to each word, say it aloud with me, and try to remember it as I tell the story. The first word is neighbor. A neighbor is a person who lives near you, in the next house or the next apartment. Your turn. Neighbor. The second word is introduce. To introduce yourself means to tell someone your name for the first time. Say it with me. Introduce. The third word is nervous. Nervous means feeling a little afraid or worried about something. Try saying it. Nervous. The fourth word is friendly. Friendly means kind and pleasant, easy to talk to. Your turn. Friendly. The fifth word is invite. To invite someone means to ask them to come somewhere or do something with you. Say it aloud. Invite. Good. Now, let's begin the story. Listen carefully. I will speak slowly and clearly. My name is Sarah. I am 26 years old, and I live in a small apartment in the city. I have lived there for 2 years. I like my apartment. It is small but comfortable. It has a big window, and I can see the park from my bedroom. Last month, something new happened. A new family moved into the apartment next door. Before that, an old man named Mr. Peters lived there. He was very quiet, and we never talked very much. But one day, I saw a moving truck outside, and I knew someone new was coming. On the first day, I heard sounds through the wall. Boxes being opened, furniture being moved, children laughing. I was curious. I wanted to know who my new neighbors were, but I felt a little nervous. I am not always good at talking to new people. Sometimes I don't know what to say. The next morning, I was making coffee in my kitchen when I heard a knock at my door. I walked to the door and opened it. Standing outside was a woman about my age. She had short, dark hair and a warm smile. She was holding a small plate of cookies. "Hello," she said. "My name is Maria. I just moved in next door. I wanted to come and introduce myself." I felt happy and surprised. "Oh, how wonderful," I said. "My name is Sarah. Please come in." Maria came inside. We sat at the kitchen table, and I made 2 cups of coffee. We talked for almost an hour. I learned that Maria had moved from another city. She had come here because of a new job. She had a husband named David and 2 children, a boy named Leo, who was 7, and a girl named Anna, who was 5. Maria told me that she was a little nervous about living in a new city. She didn't know anyone here yet. She wasn't sure about the neighborhood or the schools for her children. She looked a little tired, the way people look when they have just done something big and difficult. I understood that feeling. When I first moved to this city, I felt the same way. Lost, uncertain, hoping that things would be okay. "Don't worry," I said. "This is a good neighborhood. The people here are friendly, and the park just across the street is beautiful. Your children will love it." Maria smiled. It was a real smile, the kind that reaches the eyes. "Thank you," she said. "That makes me feel better." Before she left, she invited me to have dinner with her family on Saturday. I said yes immediately. I was excited. I thought, maybe this is the beginning of a good friendship. On Saturday evening, I knocked on Maria's door. David opened it. He was tall, with glasses, and a kind face. The 2 children ran to the door when they heard it open. Leo looked at me seriously, the way young children sometimes do with strangers. But Anna immediately grabbed my hand and said, "Come and see my room." I laughed and followed her. We had dinner together. Maria had cooked a delicious meal. We talked and laughed. The children told me about their old school and their new school. Leo said he missed his old friends. Anna said she was excited to make new ones. After dinner, we sat together in the living room and had tea. I felt comfortable, like I had known this family for years, not just a few hours. When I walked back to my apartment that night, I felt happy. Not just a small happy, but a deep and quiet happy. The kind you feel when something good has entered your life. I thought about how nervous I had been to meet my new neighbors, and I thought about how one small knock on a door, one plate of cookies, and 1 hour of honest conversation had changed everything. Sometimes all it takes is one small, brave moment, and everything that follows can be beautiful. That was our first story, The New Neighbor. Let's take a moment now to review some important vocabulary and phrases from the story. The first phrase is moved into. When someone moves into a place, they start living there. For example, a new family moved into the apartment next door. Say it with me. Moved into. Try it in a sentence. A new family moved into the apartment next door. The second phrase is introduce myself. This means to tell someone your name and who you are for the first time. For example, I wanted to come and introduce myself. Your turn. Introduce myself. Say it in a sentence. I wanted to come and introduce myself. The third phrase is, I understood that feeling. This is a beautiful empathy phrase. It means, I know exactly how that feels because I have felt it too. For example, I understood that feeling. When I first moved to this city, I felt the same way. Let's say it together. I understood that feeling. The fourth phrase is the kind that reaches the eyes. This is a description of a genuine smile. A real smile doesn't just move the mouth, it changes the whole face. The eyes become warmer and softer. For example, it was a real smile, the kind that reaches the eyes. Try saying it, the kind that reaches the eyes. The fifth phrase is a deep and quiet happy. This is not standard grammar, but it is how people sometimes describe feelings in spoken English when they want to be expressive. A deep and quiet happy means a calm but strong feeling of happiness. Not excited happiness, but settled and peaceful happiness. Say it aloud. A deep and quiet happy. Now let's do our active speaking practice. I will say a sentence from the story. You say it right back to me. Try to match the rhythm and feeling of the words. Say it with me. My name is Sarah. I am 26 years old and I live in a small apartment in the city. Again. My name is Sarah. I am 26 years old and I live in a small apartment in the city. Your turn. I felt a little nervous. I am not always good at talking to new people. Sometimes I don't know what to say. Again. I felt a little nervous. I am not always good at talking to new people. Sometimes I don't know what to say. Let's try this one. We sat at the kitchen table and I made 2 cups of coffee. We talked for almost an hour. Again, we sat at the kitchen table and I made 2 cups of coffee. We talked for almost an hour. Say it with me. I understood that feeling. When I first moved to this city, I felt the same way. Lost, uncertain, hoping that things would be okay. Again, I understood that feeling. When I first moved to this city, I felt the same way. Lost, uncertain, hoping that things would be okay. Your turn. Sometimes all it takes is one small, brave moment, and everything that follows can be beautiful. Again, sometimes all it takes is one small, brave moment, and everything that follows can be beautiful. Now, let's do our reflection practice. I will ask you 3 questions about the story. Answer each one out loud in English. Use the add one more technique we practiced before. Don't just give one word. Try to give 2 or 3 sentences. Question 1. Who is Sarah and where does she live? Take a moment, then answer out loud. Go. Question 2. How did Sarah feel when she first saw Maria? Why? Take a moment, then answer out loud. Go. Question 3. What happened at dinner on Saturday? How did Sarah feel afterward? Take a moment, then answer out loud. Go. Well done. That was our beginner story. Take a short breath and let's move into our second story. Our second story is for intermediate learners, and it is called The Job Interview. The vocabulary is richer, the sentences are longer, and the situations are more complex. But don't worry, I will still speak clearly and I will still explain key phrases after the story. Before we begin, here are 5 important words and phrases to listen for. The first is application. An application is a formal request for a job. Your turn. application. The second is opportunity. An opportunity is a chance to do something good or important. Say it with me, opportunity. The third is hesitate. To hesitate means to pause before doing something because you are unsure or nervous. Try saying it, hesitate. The fourth is impression. An impression is the feeling or opinion someone forms about you when they meet you. For example, to make a good impression means to make someone think well of you. Your turn, impression. The fifth phrase is take a deep breath. This means to breathe in slowly and deeply in order to calm yourself. Say it aloud, take a deep breath. Now, let's begin the story. James had applied for the job 3 weeks ago. He had spent an entire evening on the application, rewriting his cover letter 4 times before he felt it was good enough to send. He had almost talked himself out of applying at all. The company was one of the most respected design firms in the city, and he was not sure he was ready for something like that. But his friend had encouraged him, and in the end, he had clicked the button and sent the email before he could change his mind. He hadn't expected to hear back, so when the reply came 2 days later, asking him to come in for an interview, he sat and stared at his computer screen for a long moment. Then he closed his laptop, went to the kitchen, made himself a cup of tea, and allowed himself to feel quietly excited. The interview was scheduled for a Thursday morning at 10 o'clock. James spent the entire week preparing. He researched the company's history, read through their most recent projects, studied the names and backgrounds of the people who might be interviewing him. He practiced answering common interview questions in front of his mirror at home, which felt deeply uncomfortable at first, but gradually became useful. He chose his clothes the night before: dark blue pants, a white shirt, his good shoes, clean, simple, professional. On Thursday morning, he woke up 40 minutes before his alarm. He lay in bed for a moment, listening to the sounds of the city outside his window. Then he got up, showered, ate a small breakfast that he barely tasted, and left his apartment 20 minutes earlier than necessary. He arrived at the building with 15 minutes to spare. It was a beautiful old building near the center of the city, with large glass doors and a reception desk made of pale wood. Everything about it felt carefully considered. James took a deep breath and walked inside. The receptionist, a young woman named Claire, smiled at him and asked his name. When he told her, she checked a list and nodded. "Of course, Mr. Hartley will be with you shortly. Please take a seat." James sat in one of the chairs near the window. He noticed a small plant on the windowsill, its leaves catching the morning light. He focused on it deliberately, using it as something steady to look at while his thoughts settled. 3 minutes later, a door opened and a man walked into the reception area. He was in his mid-40s, broad-shouldered, with the kind of calm and unhurried energy that comes from years of knowing exactly what you are doing. He extended his hand toward James. "James? I'm Richard Hartley. Thank you for coming in." James stood and shook his hand. Richard's grip was firm but not aggressive. His eyes were direct but warm. James felt something in him relax slightly. They walked through the office together. It was an open space, full of natural light and the quiet sound of people working. Drawings and mood boards covered sections of the walls. James noticed a scale model of a building on a table near the window and felt a genuine pull of excitement. This was the kind of place he had imagined working in. They sat in a small meeting room at the back of the office. Richard offered James water, he accepted. Richard opened a folder on the table, which James assumed contained his application. Then he looked up with an easy smile. So, tell me a little about yourself. Not what's on your resume. I've read that. Tell me something it doesn't say. James hesitated for just a moment. This was not a question he had specifically prepared for, but he had thought broadly enough about who he was and why he was there that he found the words came to him without too much difficulty. I think the thing my resume doesn't really capture, he said slowly, is that I am genuinely passionate about spaces, not just the way they look, but the way they make people feel. I grew up in a small house with a lot of people in it, and I was always the one rearranging the furniture, trying to make the rooms feel better, less crowded, more alive. I think that instinct is still at the core of what I do. Richard listened without interrupting. When James finished, he nodded once. "That's a good answer," he said simply. And somehow, from Richard, that felt like high praise. The interview lasted 50 minutes. Richard asked James about past projects, about challenges he had faced and how he had handled them, about where he saw himself in 5 years. James answered carefully and honestly. He said, "I'm not sure," twice, when he genuinely wasn't sure, rather than filling the space with confident-sounding nonsense. He asked Richard 3 questions of his own, about the team, about the culture of the office, about what success looked like in this role. At the end, Richard walked him back to reception. They shook hands again at the door. "We'll be in touch by the end of next week," Richard said. "It was good to meet you, James." "Thank you for the opportunity," James said. "I really mean that." He walked out into the morning air. The sun had come out from behind the clouds while he was inside, and the street looked brighter than he remembered. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing slowly. He didn't know if he would get the job. He might not. There were probably other candidates who were more experienced, more polished, more everything. But he had shown up. He had answered honestly. He had asked good questions. He had been himself, as clearly and carefully as he could. And for right now, that felt like enough. He started walking toward the coffee shop on the corner. He was going to get himself a large coffee and a pastry and sit in the window for a while. He felt he had earned it. 8 days later, the email arrived. He had the job. That was our second story, the job interview. Let's go through the key vocabulary and phrases. The first phrase is talked himself out of. This means to convince yourself not to do something by thinking of reasons against it. For example, he had almost talked himself out of applying at all. Say it with me. Talked himself out of. Your turn. He almost talked himself out of applying. The second phrase is with time to spare. This means arriving earlier than needed, with extra time left over. For example, he arrived at the building with 15 minutes to spare. Let's say it together. With time to spare. The third phrase is the kind of calm and unhurried energy. This is a description of someone who moves and speaks without rushing, without anxiety. They feel settled and sure of themselves. Try saying it. Calm and unhurried energy. The fourth phrase is not what's on your resume. A resume is a document that lists your education and work experience. Richard wanted to know something personal, something the official document couldn't capture. Say it aloud. Not what's on your resume. The fifth phrase is confident-sounding nonsense. This is a very expressive way of saying things that sound impressive but mean nothing. Many people do this in interviews. filling silence with words that seem good but are actually empty. James chose honesty instead. Your turn. Confident sounding nonsense. The sixth phrase is, he had been himself, as clearly and carefully as he could. This is one of the most important ideas in the whole story. Being yourself in a stressful situation takes courage and skill. Say it with me. He had been himself, as clearly and carefully as he could. Now let's do our active speaking practice for story 2. Say it with me. He had spent an entire evening on the application, rewriting his cover letter 4 times before he felt it was good enough to send. Again, he had spent an entire evening on the application, rewriting his cover letter 4 times before he felt it was good enough to send. Your turn. He focused on it deliberately, using it as something steady to look at while his thoughts settled. Again, he focused on it deliberately, using it as something steady to look at while his thoughts settled. Let's try this one. I am genuinely passionate about spaces, not just the way they look, but the way they make people feel. Again, I am genuinely passionate about spaces, not just the way they look, but the way they make people feel. Say it with me. He said, I'm not sure twice, when he genuinely wasn't sure, rather than filling the space with confident-sounding nonsense. Again, he said, I'm not sure twice, when he genuinely wasn't sure, rather than filling the space with confident-sounding nonsense. Your turn. He had shown up. He had answered honestly. He had asked good questions. He had been himself, as clearly and carefully as he could. Again, he had shown up. He had answered honestly. He had asked good questions. He had been himself, as clearly and carefully as he could. Let's say it together. And for right now, that felt like enough. Again. And for right now, that felt like enough. Now let's do our reflection practice for story 2. Question 1. Why was James nervous about applying for this job? What did he do to prepare? Take a moment, then answer out loud. Go. Question 2. What question did Richard ask that James hadn't prepared for? How did James answer it? Take a moment, then answer out loud. Go. Question 3. How did James feel when he left the interview? What did he think about his own performance? Take a moment, then answer out loud. Go. Bonus question. Think about a time in your own life when you had to do something that made you nervous. What did you do? How did it feel? Speak for 1 minute. Take your time and speak now. Go. Excellent work. Take a breath. We are about to move into our third and final main story, and it is the most advanced one. So take a moment to prepare yourself, and let's continue. Our third story is for advanced learners, and it is called The Last Garden. It is told at a more natural pace with complex vocabulary, longer sentences, figurative language, and deeper emotional themes. I will still speak clearly, but I will challenge you more than in the previous 2 stories. Before we begin, here are 6 words and phrases to listen for. The first is tend. In this story, to tend means to look after something carefully over time, like tending a garden. Say it with me. Tend. The second is reluctant. Reluctant means not wanting to do something, doing it unwillingly. Your turn. Reluctant. The third is inherit. To inherit something means to receive it from someone who has died. Try saying it. inherit. The fourth is overgrown. Overgrown means covered with plants or weeds that have grown wild and out of control. Let's say it together. Overgrown. The fifth phrase is make peace with. To make peace with something means to accept it, even if it is painful or difficult. Say it aloud. Make peace with. The sixth is legacy. A legacy is something left behind by a person after they die, something that continues to exist or have meaning. Your turn. Legacy. Now, let's begin. When Eleanor died in October, she left her house to her daughter Nora. Not the money in her account, which was small. Not the furniture, most of which was old and worn in the way that things become when they have been used deeply and honestly over many years. What she left Nora, more than anything else, was the garden. Nora had not been back to the house in almost 3 years. The last time she had visited, she and her mother had argued about something that felt enormous at the time and now felt impossible to fully remember. The way arguments sometimes are, large in the moment, strange and shapeless afterward. She had driven home that evening, telling herself she would call in a few days. She had not called for 2 weeks. By the time she did, the distance between them had set like concrete, and neither of them had quite known how to break it properly. They had been in contact, emails, the occasional phone call at Christmas, but the closeness they had once had, the easy, comfortable closeness of people who share a language that is entirely their own, had not fully returned. And then Eleanor had gotten sick, and then she had gotten sicker, and then she was gone. Nora drove to the house on a gray Saturday in November. She had been putting it off for weeks, finding reasons not to go. A busy week at work, a cold she hadn't quite shaken. The honest truth was that she was reluctant in the way that people are reluctant to do things that will make something irrevocably real. Because as long as she didn't go to the house, some small part of her could still hold on to the idea that she might arrive one day and find her mother in the kitchen, putting the kettle on, turning to smile at the sound of the door. She parked outside and sat in the car for a few minutes before she went in. The house looked smaller than she remembered. Houses always seem to shrink a little when the people who filled them are gone. She let herself in with the key the attorney had given her. The hallway smelled of her mother. Not perfume exactly, but the particular combination of things that had always meant Eleanor. Lavender, old books, something warm and faintly sweet that Nora had never been able to name, but had always recognized instantly. She moved through the rooms slowly. The living room, the kitchen, the small study where her mother had kept her papers and her plants on the windowsill. Everything was as Eleanor had left it, which made it feel both inhabited and unbearably empty at the same time. She had been avoiding the garden. She knew that. Eventually, she unlocked the back door and stepped outside. She stopped. The garden was extraordinary. Even in November, even stripped of its summer color, it was extraordinary. Her mother had spent 40 years tending it. 40 years of planting and pruning and learning from failure and trying again. There were paths of old stone that wound between raised beds and climbing frames. There were trees that had been shaped slowly by decades of careful attention. There was a bench in the corner, slightly worn, positioned to catch the last light of the afternoon. And everywhere, even now, there was a sense of intention, of design, of love made visible and patient and permanent. Nora stood in the middle of the garden and felt something shift inside her. Not dramatically, not like a wave crashing, more like a door opening slowly in a room she had forgotten existed. She had known her mother tended the garden. Of course she had. She had grown up watching her out here on weekend mornings, cup of tea in hand, moving between the beds with a quiet, focused energy that Nora had sometimes found puzzling as a child. What was so interesting about plants? What was the point of spending so many hours on something that just kept growing and needing attention and growing again? But standing here now, she began to understand something she had not understood before. The garden was not just a garden. It was a record. A 40-year conversation between a woman and the living world. Every tree was a decision. Every path was a solution to a problem. Every plant that had survived the winters was a small victory that Eleanor had shared with no one, or with everyone, depending on how you looked at it. Nora walked slowly along one of the stone paths. She crouched down next to a bed of herbs, rosemary and thyme, and something she couldn't name, and pressed her fingers gently into the soil. It was cold and dark and good-smelling in the particular way that healthy earth smells. She thought about all the things she had wanted to say to her mother and hadn't said. The apologies, the explanations, the simple sentences that might have rebuilt what the argument had damaged if she had found the courage to say them in time. She thought about how easy it is to believe that time is infinite, that there will always be another chance, another phone call, another visit, another Saturday. She sat down on the bench in the corner, the one positioned to catch the late afternoon light. From here, she could see the whole garden. She could see how everything had been arranged to work together, how each part complemented the others, how the whole thing, even in its winter quiet, had a kind of wholeness to it, a completeness. She did not cry. She had cried a great deal in the weeks since Eleanor had died, and she had thought she might be finished with that for a while. Instead, she sat very still and let the garden be around her, and tried to make peace with all the things she could not change. She sat there for a long time. When she finally stood up, the light had shifted and the garden had gone quiet in the way that outdoor spaces do in the late afternoon of a gray November day. She brushed the earth from her fingers and looked around one more time. She made a decision then. Not a dramatic decision, just a quiet one. She was going to learn to tend the garden. Not because it was practical, not because she had any particular interest in plants or soil or the slow, patient work of growing things, but because her mother had built something extraordinary here over 40 years, and Nora was not going to let it disappear. Not because of neglect, not because of busy weeks and reasonable excuses and the small, lazy cowardices that accumulate into large regrets. She was going to learn what her mother had known. She was going to ask the garden the questions she should have asked Eleanor. And she was going to listen to the answers. It was not the conversation she had hoped to have, but it was the one that was available to her. And sometimes, that is enough to begin with. She locked the back door behind her and walked back through the house. At the front door, she paused and looked back at the hallway, at the lavender smell and the warm, faint sweetness that she still couldn't name. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, to no one, to everyone, to the house. Then she opened the door and walked out into the November gray. She already knew she would be back next weekend, and the one after that. Some inheritances are not about money or furniture. Some inheritances are about learning, at last, how to pay attention. That was our third story, The Last Garden. Let's go through the key vocabulary and phrases. The first phrase is set like concrete. This means to become fixed and hard, impossible to change easily. Like concrete that starts as liquid and then hardens. For example, The distance between them had set like concrete. Say it with me. Set like concrete. The second phrase is irrevocably real. Irrevocably means in a way that cannot be undone or reversed. So irrevocably real means real in a permanent and unchangeable way. Nora didn't want to go to the house because going would make her mother's death permanently and undeniably real. Your turn. Irrevocably real. The third phrase is love made visible and patient and permanent. This is figurative language, describing the garden as a physical expression of Eleanor's love, something you could see and touch. The garden showed love through years of quiet work. Let's say it together. Love made visible and patient and permanent. The fourth phrase is a 40-year conversation between a woman and the living world. This is a beautiful metaphor. A conversation usually happens between two people talking, but here it describes the relationship between Eleanor and her garden, a relationship built through action and attention over many years. Try saying it. A 40-year conversation between a woman and the living world. The fifth phrase is make peace with all the things she could not change. This means to accept painful realities rather than fighting against them. Nora could not undo her arguments with her mother. She could not bring her back. She could only accept those facts and find a way to move forward. Say it aloud. Make peace with all the things she could not change. The sixth phrase is the small, lazy cowardices that accumulate into large regrets. Cowardice means the failure to be brave when bravery is needed. This phrase describes how small moments of avoiding difficult things, phone calls not made, apologies not given, visits not taken, add up over time into enormous regrets. Your turn. The small, lazy cowardices that accumulate into large regrets. The seventh phrase is some inheritances are not about money or furniture. This is the thematic heart of the story. Nora inherited a garden, but really she inherited something deeper, a way of seeing, a practice of attention, a connection to her mother that was still possible through the work of tending something Eleanor had loved. Say it with me. Some inheritances are not about money or furniture. Now let's do our active speaking practice for story 3. These are longer and more complex sentences. Take your time with them. Say it with me. She had been putting it off for weeks, finding reasons not to go. Again, she had been putting it off for weeks, finding reasons not to go. Your turn. The house looked smaller than she remembered. Houses always seem to shrink a little when the people who filled them are gone. Again, the house looked smaller than she remembered. Houses always seem to shrink a little when the people who filled them are gone. Let's try this one. Everything was as Eleanor had left it, which made it feel both inhabited and unbearably empty at the same time. Again, everything was as Eleanor had left it, which made it feel both inhabited and unbearably empty at the same time. Say it aloud. Not because she had any particular interest in plants or soil or the slow, patient work of growing things, but because her mother had built something extraordinary here over 40 years, and Nora was not going to let it disappear. Again, not because she had any particular interest in plants or soil or the slow, patient work of growing things, but because her mother had built something extraordinary here over 40 years, and Nora was not going to let it disappear. Your turn. Some inheritances are not about money or furniture. Some inheritances are about learning, at last, how to pay attention. Again, some inheritances are not about money or furniture. Some inheritances are about learning, at last, how to pay attention. Let's say it together. It was not the conversation she had hoped to have, but it was the one that was available to her. and sometimes that is enough to begin with. Again, it was not the conversation she had hoped to have, but it was the one that was available to her, and sometimes that is enough to begin with. Now let's do our reflection practice for story 3. Question 1. Why had Nora been avoiding going to the house? What was she afraid of? Take a moment. Think carefully. Then answer out loud. Go. Question 2. What did Nora discover when she finally went into the garden? What did she understand about her mother that she hadn't understood before? Take a moment. Then answer out loud. Go. Question 3. What decision did Nora make at the end of the story? Why did she make it? Take a moment. Then answer out loud. Go. Bonus question. Think about someone in your life who has taught you something important, not by telling you directly, but through the way they lived or the things they did. Speak about that person for 2 minutes in English. Take your time and speak now. Go. Now I want to do something very special with you. We are going to do a full shadowing session using sentences from all 3 stories. Shadowing is when you repeat a sentence immediately after you hear it, trying to match the rhythm, the pace, the rises and falls in the voice. This is one of the most powerful techniques in all of language learning, and it works best when you do it out loud, not in your head. So please, speak with me. I will say each sentence once slowly, then once at a more natural pace. Your job is to repeat both times. Sentence 1 from story 1. Slowly. Sometimes all it takes is one small, brave moment, and everything that follows can be beautiful. Natural pace. Sometimes all it takes is one small, brave moment, and everything that follows can be beautiful. Your turn. Say it now. Go. Sentence 2 from story 1. Slowly. I felt comfortable, like I had known this family for years, not just a few hours. Natural pace. I felt comfortable, like I had known this family for years, not just a few hours. Your turn. Go. Sentence 3 from story 2. Slowly. He had shown up. He had answered honestly. He had asked good questions. He had been himself, as clearly and carefully as he could. Natural pace. He had shown up. He had answered honestly. He had asked good questions. He had been himself, as clearly and carefully as he could. Your turn. Go. Sentence 4 from story 2. Slowly. I am genuinely passionate about spaces, not just the way they look, but the way they make people feel. Natural pace. I am genuinely passionate about spaces, not just the way they look, but the way they make people feel. Your turn. Go. Sentence 5 from story 3. Slowly. The garden was not just a garden. It was a record. A 40-year conversation between a woman and the living world. Natural pace. The garden was not just a garden. It was a record. A 40-year conversation between a woman and the living world. Your turn. Go. Sentence 6 from story 3. Slowly. She was going to learn what her mother had known. She was going to ask the garden the questions she should have asked Eleanor. And she was going to listen to the answers. Natural pace. She was going to learn what her mother had known. She was going to ask the garden the questions she should have asked Eleanor. And she was going to listen to the answers. Your turn. Go. Sentence 7 from Story 3. Slowly. It was not the conversation she had hoped to have, but it was the one that was available to her. And sometimes, that is enough to begin with. Natural pace. It was not the conversation she had hoped to have, but it was the one that was available to her. And sometimes, that is enough to begin with. Your turn. Go. Sentence 8. A beautiful line from Story 1. Slowly. Not just a small happy, but a deep and quiet happy. Natural pace. Not just a small happy, but a deep and quiet happy. Your turn. Go. Sentence 9 from Story 2. Slowly. He said, "I'm not sure" twice, when he genuinely wasn't sure, rather than filling the space with confident-sounding nonsense. Natural pace. He said, "I'm not sure" twice, when he genuinely wasn't sure, rather than filling the space with confident-sounding nonsense. Your turn. Go. Sentence 10 from Story 3. Slowly. Some inheritances are not about money or furniture. Some inheritances are about learning, at last, how to pay attention. Natural pace. Some inheritances are not about money or furniture. Some inheritances are about learning, at last, how to pay attention. Your turn. Go. Wonderful. You have just shadowed 10 sentences from 3 different levels of English. Each one is different in complexity, in rhythm, in feeling. And by saying them out loud, by letting them live in your mouth and your voice, you are absorbing the music of English in a way that no grammar exercise can teach you. Now let's do a quick review of the most important vocabulary from all 3 stories today. I will say each word or phrase, give you a short definition, and then use it in a sentence. Repeat each one after me. Word 1. Neighbor. A person who lives near you. For example, my new neighbor knocked on my door this morning. Say it with me. My new neighbor knocked on my door this morning. Word 2. Introduce yourself. To tell someone your name for the first time. For example, she came to introduce herself and we immediately felt comfortable. Your turn. She came to introduce herself and we immediately felt comfortable. Word 3. Application. A formal request for a job or a place. For example, he spent all evening working on his application. Let's say it together. He spent all evening working on his application. Word 4. Hesitate. To pause before doing something because of doubt or nervousness. For example, she hesitated for a moment before opening the door. Try saying it. She hesitated for a moment before opening the door. Word 5. Impression. The feeling or idea someone forms about you. For example, he wanted to make a good impression at the interview. Say it aloud. He wanted to make a good impression at the interview. Word 6, reluctant, not wanting to do something. For example, she was reluctant to go back to the house. Your turn. She was reluctant to go back to the house. Word 7, inherit, to receive something from someone who has died. For example, she inherited the house and the garden from her mother. Say it with me. She inherited the house and the garden from her mother. Word 8, overgrown, covered with wild plants that have not been looked after. For example, the garden was overgrown after years of neglect. Let's say it together. The garden was overgrown after years of neglect. Word 9, legacy, something meaningful left behind after a person dies. For example, the garden was her mother's greatest legacy. Try saying it. The garden was her mother's greatest legacy. Word 10, make peace with, to accept something difficult or painful. For example, she needed to make peace with the things she could not change. Your turn. She needed to make peace with the things she could not change. Word 11, accumulate, to build up slowly over time. For example, small regrets can accumulate into something very large if you are not careful. Say it aloud. Small regrets can accumulate into something very large if you are not careful. Word 12, irrevocably, in a way that cannot be undone or reversed. For example, that moment changed things irrevocably. Say it with me. That moment changed things irrevocably. These 12 words and phrases are all high-value additions to your English vocabulary. They are the kind of words that appear in books, films, conversations, and professional settings. The more you use them, the more naturally they will come to you. Now it is your turn to tell a story. Because listening to stories is only half of the practice. The other half is telling them yourself. I am going to give you 3 story prompts, one for each level. Choose the one that feels right for you. Or if you are feeling ambitious, try all 3. Each one should last at least 2 minutes when you speak it out loud. Don't write it first. Just think for 30 seconds and then speak. Let the words come as they come. Story prompt 1 for beginners. Tell the story of a time you met someone new. Where were you? Who was the person? What did you talk about? How did you feel? What happened after that first meeting? Take 30 seconds to think, then speak for at least 2 minutes. Go now. Story prompt 2 for intermediate learners. Tell the story of a time you had to do something difficult or scary. Maybe a presentation, maybe an exam, maybe a conversation you had been avoiding. What happened before, during, and after? What did you feel? What did you learn? Take 30 seconds to think, then speak for at least 2 minutes. Go now. Story prompt 3 for advanced learners. Tell the story of someone you have lost or grown distant from, and something they left behind that still matters to you. It could be a person, a place, a memory, an object, or a way of seeing the world. Speak with honesty and detail. Take 30 seconds to think, then speak for at least 3 minutes. Go now. These prompts are not just language exercises. They are invitations to use English to say something real, something true. And when you do that, when you use a foreign language to express your actual thoughts and feelings and memories, that is when it stops being a foreign language. That is when it starts becoming part of you. We are coming toward the end of today's main lesson. But before we close, I want to give you a simple and realistic plan for using stories as part of your daily English practice. Because one lesson is a beginning. What happens after the lesson is everything. Here is a 7-day listening and storytelling plan you can start right now. Day 1. Listen to story 1 again. This time, pause after each paragraph and summarize what you just heard in your own words, out loud. Don't read along, just listen, then speak. Day 2. Listen to story 2 again. Choose 3 sentences that you found beautiful or interesting. Write them down. Say them out loud 10 times each until they feel completely natural in your mouth. Day 3. Listen to story 3 again. After listening, close your eyes and try to retell the whole story from memory. You don't need to remember every word, just the shape of it, the beginning, the middle, and the end. Day 4. Tell a story from your own life using the when, what, how structure. When did it happen? What happened? How did it make you feel? Record yourself for 3 minutes. Listen back. Notice where you paused. Notice where your language was strong. Day 5. Choose any English story, book, podcast, or film that you enjoy. Listen for 20 minutes. Write down 5 new words or phrases you heard. Look them up if you need to. Then, use each one in a sentence of your own. Day 6. Shadow a section from one of today's 3 stories for 10 minutes. Repeat each sentence immediately after you hear it. Try to match the rhythm and feeling exactly. Push yourself until it feels natural. Day 7. Tell someone a story in English. A friend, a family member, a study partner, or even yourself in a recording. Tell them something real that happened to you this week. Use detail. Use feeling. Use the vocabulary you've been learning. And enjoy the telling of it. If you follow this plan for 1 week, you will feel a difference. And if you follow it for 1 month, the difference will be remarkable. Before we close today's lesson completely, I want to explain why I am giving you a bonus story today. The first 3 stories were designed to take you through levels: beginner, intermediate, advanced. But this 4th story is different. It is designed for all levels together. The language is clear and accessible, but the ideas are rich and layered. It is the kind of story that a beginner can enjoy and follow, while an advanced learner will find depth in the details. I have also designed this story specifically around vocabulary. As I tell it, I will pause at certain moments to explain a key word in context. This is called embedded vocabulary learning, and research shows it is one of the most effective ways to truly internalize new words, because you learn them exactly when they become relevant. Before we begin, there are just 3 words to know. The first is browse. To browse means to look through things slowly and casually, without looking for anything specific. You might browse a bookshop, or browse the internet, or browse a menu. Say it with me. Browse. The second is peculiar. Peculiar means unusual or strange, but often in an interesting way rather than a frightening way. Your turn. Peculiar. The third is profound. Profound means very deep, very serious, very meaningful. A profound thought is one that makes you think carefully and feel something important. Try saying it. Profound. Now, let's begin the bonus story, The Old Bookshop. There is a bookshop on a narrow street in the old part of the city that most people walk past without noticing. It has a small green door that is slightly too low, so you have to dip your head when you enter. And inside, it smells the way all good bookshops smell, of paper and dust and the particular quiet that collects in places where people have been thinking for a long time. The shop belongs to a man named Thomas. Thomas is 63 years old, has white hair that he never quite manages to comb properly, and wears the same brown cardigan almost every day. He has owned the shop for 31 years. Before that, he was a teacher. Before that, he was a student who spent too much time in bookshops and not enough time in lectures. He considers this to have been excellent preparation for his life. On a Tuesday afternoon in February, a young woman came into the shop. Her name was Priya, and she was 22 years old. She had just finished her first week at a new job in the city, a job she had worked very hard to get and which she was not yet sure she was good at, and she had walked into the bookshop almost by accident. She had been walking, not looking where she was going particularly, lost in thought, and the green door had appeared in front of her, and something about it had made her stop. She went inside. She began to browse. This is the first vocabulary word I want you to notice. To browse means to look through things without looking for anything specific. Priya was not looking for a particular book. She was just moving between the shelves slowly, reading the titles, pulling things out occasionally to look at the cover or read the first page. This kind of browsing is one of the great pleasures available to human beings, and it costs nothing except time. Thomas was sitting behind the desk at the back of the shop. He was reading. He looked up when Priya came in and nodded once, then returned to his book. This is the correct behavior for a bookshop owner: to acknowledge the customer, to make them feel welcome, but to give them space. Thomas had learned long ago that the worst thing you can do to someone browsing a bookshop is talk to them. Priya spent about 20 minutes moving through the shelves. She picked up 6 books and put 5 of them back. The 6th was a small collection of short stories by a writer she had never heard of. The cover was plain and the title was simple. She opened to the first page and read the opening paragraph. And then she stood in the middle of the bookshop aisle and read the second paragraph. And then the third. And then she realized she had been standing there for 7 minutes, and she went to the desk and bought the book. "Good choice," Thomas said. Priya looked at him. "Have you read it?" "Twice," he said. "The third story is the best one, but don't skip to it. Read them in order." She nodded. She thanked him. She left. She came back the following Tuesday. She had finished the book. She had read the third story twice. "You were right," she said, "about the third story." Thomas smiled. It was a small and satisfied smile. The smile of a person who has recommended something they love and had it received well. "I usually am," he said, "about books." She laughed. It was the first time she had laughed all week. She hadn't realized until that moment how much she had needed to. "Can I ask you something peculiar?" she said. There is the second vocabulary word, peculiar. Unusual, strange, but in an interesting way. Priya is about to ask something that might seem odd or unexpected, but she feels comfortable enough in this space with this man to ask it anyway. "Of course," Thomas said. "How do you know which books to recommend to people? You barely saw me for 2 seconds before I bought that one." Thomas considered the question seriously. He did not give quick answers to questions that deserved careful ones. "I watch how people browse," he said finally. "You moved slowly. You weren't looking at the popular shelf. You picked up things that weren't recent. You read the first page of everything you considered buying. That tells me something about what you were looking for." "What am I looking for?" Priya asked. He looked at her for a moment. "Something real," he said. "Something that will tell you the truth about something." She was quiet for a moment. She thought about her week, about the new job and the uncertainty, and the feeling of being slightly lost in a city that had not yet become familiar. "Yes," she said, "I suppose that's right." Thomas reached under the desk and brought out a book. It was thin. The spine was worn in a way that suggested it had been read many times. "Try this one," he said. "It's about a woman who moves to a new city and doesn't know anyone. It's honest and it's funny. And by the end, you'll feel less alone." He handed it to her. She looked at the cover. Then she looked at him. "How much is it?" "Take it," he said. "Bring it back when you're done. Or keep it if it helps you." She tried to pay. He would not accept the money. She left feeling something she could not quite name, something warm and unexpected and slightly profound. There is the third vocabulary word: profound, deep, meaningful, important in a way that is hard to fully explain. The feeling Priya had leaving the shop was not large or dramatic, but it was profound, because a stranger had seen something true about her and had responded with kindness, and that had mattered more than she could have anticipated. She came back every Tuesday after that. Sometimes she bought something. Sometimes she just browsed and talked to Thomas for a while. She learned that he had been married for 34 years to a woman named Helen, who had died 4 years ago. That he had a son who lived in another country and called every Sunday. That he had read over 3,000 books and could still be surprised by them. That he kept a list of every book he had ever read in a notebook that lived in the top drawer of his desk. Thomas learned that Priya had grown up far from this city, that she had wanted to be a writer when she was 12, and had given up on the idea when she was 17 because someone had told her it was impractical. That she still wrote sometimes, in private, in a notebook she kept under her bed. That the new job was getting easier, that she had found a cafe she liked, that she was starting to feel at home. By April, she had found 2 friends in the city. By June, she felt the place had become hers. She still visited the bookshop every Tuesday. One afternoon, she brought Thomas a short piece of writing she had done. She slid it across the desk without saying anything. He read it slowly while she pretended to browse. When he finished, he looked up. "You're a writer," he said. It was not a question. "I don't know," she said. "I do," he said. And then he went back to his book. She stood in the aisle for a moment. Her heart was doing something unusual. Then she picked a book off the shelf, paid for it, and left. She went home and opened her notebook. She wrote for 3 hours. That was the beginning of something. She didn't know yet what it would become. But beginnings rarely announce themselves clearly. They arrive quietly, in narrow streets, through low green doors, in the particular smell of old paper, and in the honest eyes of a stranger who sees something in you before you have seen it yourself. That was our 4th story, The Old Bookshop. Let's review the 3 embedded vocabulary words one more time. To browse. To look through things slowly and without a specific purpose. For example, she spent 20 minutes browsing the shelves. Say it with me. She spent 20 minutes browsing the shelves. Peculiar. Strange or unusual in an interesting way. For example, can I ask you something peculiar? Your turn. Can I ask you something peculiar? Profound. Very deep and meaningful. For example, she left feeling something slightly profound. Let's say it together. She left feeling something slightly profound. Now let's do our shadowing practice for story 4. Say it with me. There is a bookshop on a narrow street in the old part of the city that most people walk past without noticing. Again. There is a bookshop on a narrow street in the old part of the city that most people walk past without noticing. Your turn. This kind of browsing is one of the great pleasures available to human beings, and it costs nothing except time. Again. This kind of browsing is one of the great pleasures available to human beings, and it costs nothing except time. Let's try this one. Something real. Something that will tell you the truth about something. Again. Something real. Something that will tell you the truth about something. Say it aloud. A stranger had seen something true about her and had responded with kindness, and that had mattered more than she could have anticipated. Again. A stranger had seen something true about her and had responded with kindness, and that had mattered more than she could have anticipated. Your turn. Beginnings rarely announce themselves clearly. They arrive quietly, in narrow streets, through low green doors, in the particular smell of old paper, and in the honest eyes of a stranger who sees something in you before you have seen it yourself. Again, beginnings rarely announce themselves clearly. They arrive quietly, in narrow streets, through low green doors, in the particular smell of old paper, and in the honest eyes of a stranger who sees something in you before you have seen it yourself. Now your reflection questions for story 4. Question 1. Why do you think Priya went into the bookshop? What was she really looking for? Take a moment, then answer out loud. Go. Question 2. What made Thomas a good bookshop owner? What did he understand about people? Take a moment, then answer out loud. Go. Question 3. What happened to Priya over the months she visited the bookshop? How did she change? Take a moment, then answer out loud. Go. Bonus question. Think about a place in your life that has felt like a safe or special space for you. A shop, a park, a library, a room, anywhere. Describe it in detail in English. Speak for 2 minutes. Take your time and speak now. Go. I want to take a few minutes to reflect on what these 4 stories have taught us. Not just about vocabulary and grammar, but about English itself. The first story, The New Neighbor, taught us how to describe people, places, and feelings simply and clearly. It showed us how everyday moments can be described beautifully with common words. It reminded us that the most important conversations sometimes happen over a cup of coffee between 2 strangers who are both a little nervous. The second story, The Job Interview, taught us how to describe preparation, nervousness, and professional situations. It showed us the difference between trying to sound impressive and simply being honest. It reminded us that saying, I'm not sure, when you are not sure, is always more powerful than pretending. The third story, The Last Garden, taught us some of the most expressive and literary English in today's lesson. It showed us how feelings of grief, regret, and love can be described in language that is honest and beautiful at the same time. It reminded us that some of the most important conversations we have in life are not with other people, but with the things they have left behind. The fourth story, The Old Bookshop, taught us how a simple friendship between two very different people can change a life. It showed us how being seen and understood by another person is one of the most powerful forces in human experience. And it reminded us that beginnings, real beginnings, often look like accidents. These are not just language lessons. They are life lessons. And I believe that is what the best English learning should feel like. Not a list of words to memorize, but a world to enter. A world full of people and places and feelings and ideas that expand your understanding of what it means to be human. Every story you listen to in English makes you a better English listener. Every story you tell makes you a better English speaker. And every story you understand a little more deeply makes you a richer and more connected version of yourself. That is what language learning is really for. Not for passing tests, not for impressing people, but for connection, for understanding, for being able to reach across all the distances that separate human beings and say, I hear you, I see you, I understand. And you are doing that in English every day, and that is extraordinary. Before you truly finish today's lesson, I have one more gift for you, an extended shadowing and speaking drill section. This section is pure practice. No new stories, no explanations, just sentences, rhythms, and your voice. This is the section where fluency lives, not in understanding, but in doing. So please, speak out loud with me for every single sentence. Don't listen passively. Open your mouth. Use your voice. Let English live in your body, not just in your mind. Let's go. Drill 1. Say it with me slowly. I live in a small apartment in the city. I have lived there for 2 years. I like it because it is quiet and the light is good in the mornings. Now faster. I live in a small apartment in the city. I have lived there for 2 years. I like it because it is quiet and the light is good in the mornings. Your turn. Say it now. Go. Drill 2. Try saying this slowly. I felt nervous about meeting new people, but when she smiled, I felt something relax inside me. Now faster. I felt nervous about meeting new people, but when she smiled, I felt something relax inside me. Your turn. Say it now. Go. Drill 3. Say it aloud slowly. He had applied for the job 3 weeks ago. He had almost talked himself out of applying at all. Now faster. He had applied for the job 3 weeks ago. He had almost talked himself out of applying at all. Your turn. Say it now. Go. Drill 4. Let's say it together slowly. I am genuinely passionate about this. Not just the way it looks, but the way it makes me feel. Now faster. I am genuinely passionate about this. Not just the way it looks, but the way it makes me feel. Your turn. Say it now. Go. Drill 5. Say it with me slowly. She had not been back for almost 3 years. The last time she had visited, they had argued. Now faster. She had not been back for almost 3 years. The last time she had visited, they had argued. Your turn. Say it now. Go. Drill 6. Try saying this slowly. Everything was as she had left it, which made it feel both inhabited and unbearably empty at the same time. Now faster. Everything was as she had left it, which made it feel both inhabited and unbearably empty at the same time. Your turn. Say it now. Go. Drill 7. Say it aloud slowly. She needed to make peace with all the things she could not change. Now faster. She needed to make peace with all the things she could not change. Your turn. Say it now. Go. Drill 8. Let's say it together slowly. Some inheritances are not about money or furniture. Some inheritances are about learning how to pay attention. Now faster. Some inheritances are not about money or furniture. Some inheritances are about learning how to pay attention. Your turn. Say it now. Go. Drill 9. Say it with me slowly. She began to browse, to look through things slowly, without looking for anything specific. Now faster. She began to browse, to look through things slowly, without looking for anything specific. Your turn. Say it now. Go. Drill 10. Try saying this slowly. A stranger had seen something true about her and had responded with kindness, and that had mattered more than she could have anticipated. Now faster. A stranger had seen something true about her and had responded with kindness, and that had mattered more than she could have anticipated. Your turn. Say it now. Go. Drill 11. Say it aloud slowly. Beginnings rarely announce themselves clearly. They arrive quietly, and in the honest eyes of a stranger who sees something in you before you have seen it yourself. Now faster. Beginnings rarely announce themselves clearly. They arrive quietly, and in the honest eyes of a stranger who sees something in you before you have seen it yourself. Your turn. Say it now. Go. Drill 12. This is your final drill, and I want you to say it with feeling. Say it with me slowly. Every story you listen to in English makes you a better listener. Every story you tell makes you a better speaker. And every story you understand a little more deeply makes you a richer and more connected version of yourself. Now faster. Every story you listen to in English makes you a better listener. Every story you tell makes you a better speaker. And every story you understand a little more deeply makes you a richer and more connected version of yourself. Your turn. One last time, with feeling. Go. We have one final challenge for you today, and this is the most important one of all. I want you to write, or rather speak, your own short story in English right now, without preparing too much, without worrying about mistakes. Just think for 1 minute and then speak for 3 to 5 minutes. Here is your story prompt. Think about one ordinary day in your life that turned out to be more important than it seemed at the time. Maybe you met someone who changed things for you. Maybe you went somewhere new and felt something unexpected. Maybe you did something small that led to something big. Maybe you had a conversation that you still think about. That is your story. Not a dramatic story, not a perfect story. Just a true one. Use everything we have practiced today. Describe the setting. Describe the people. Describe how you felt. Use past tense to tell what happened. Use feeling words. Use detail. Use the rhythm of English that you have been practicing through all 4 stories. Take 1 minute now to think. Close your eyes if it helps. Let the memory come to you. Are you ready? Speak now. 3 to 5 minutes. Go. How did that feel? Whatever came out, it was yours. It was real English. It was your story, told in a language that is becoming more and more your own. That is the most powerful thing you can do as an English learner. Not repeat after someone else, but create something that didn't exist before. A story in English that only you could tell, because it is your life, your experience, your voice. Keep telling your stories, in English, out loud, every day. I want to leave you with one final thought about stories and language learning, because I think it is something that often gets overlooked in traditional lessons. The world is full of stories in English, not just in books and films, but everywhere. Every conversation you overhear, every song you listen to, every social media post, every news article, every podcast, every email from a colleague, every text message from a friend. All of it is story. All of it is language in context. All of it is practice material waiting to be used. One of the best habits you can build as an English learner is to start noticing stories around you. When you watch a film in English, don't just try to understand the plot. Pay attention to how the characters speak to each other. Notice the phrases they use when they are nervous. Notice how they express affection. Notice how they argue and how they apologize. Notice the rhythm of their speech when they are excited versus when they are tired. When you listen to a podcast in English, do the same thing. Don't just absorb the information. Listen to the shape of the sentences. Listen for the thinking phrases people use when they are considering a difficult question. Listen for how they transition between ideas. Listen for the words they choose when they want to emphasize something important. And when you read in English, even something short, read it twice. The first time for meaning, the second time for language. The second time, notice a sentence that you find beautiful or interesting. Copy it into a notebook. Say it out loud. Think about why it works. What makes it clear? What makes it memorable? This is what passionate language learners do. They don't just study English, they live inside it as much as possible. They treat every encounter with the language as an opportunity to absorb something new. And gradually, this is how English stops being something you study and becomes something you simply have. Like a room you know so well you can move through it in the dark. That is where you are headed. And today was one more step in that direction. Well done, truly. Today you have listened to 4 complete stories in English at beginner, intermediate, advanced, and all levels. You have shadowed key sentences from every story. You have practiced vocabulary in context. You have answered reflection questions. You have told your own stories. And you have done all of this in English. That is a full and powerful lesson, and you should feel genuinely proud of yourself for completing it. Remember, the best thing you can do after a lesson like this is not to move on immediately. Sit with it for a moment. Let the stories settle. Come back tomorrow and listen to one of them again. Notice what you understand better the second time. Notice what new words jump out at you. Notice how the rhythm of the language feels more familiar. Fluency is built in layers. Today was one layer. Tomorrow will be another. And every day you practice, every story you listen to, every sentence you repeat out loud is another layer placed carefully on top of the ones before it. Until one day, not so far from now, you will realize that English no longer feels like something you are learning. It feels like something you already know. Keep listening, keep speaking, keep telling your stories, in English and in life. Before you go, please subscribe to English in Moments and press the bell icon so you never miss a new lesson. We upload a brand new English practice video every single day because we believe that every single day is an opportunity to grow a little more. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm Elena, and I will see you in the very next lesson.